propyl ring rather than the oxytane ring. Position 2 and 3, if you look at our position 2, so we have looked at the nitrogen one, we have said all the groups that you can put there: propyl group, ethyl group, substituted ethyl group, cyclopropyl ring, even an oxytane ring with changes or with modification of the biological activity. Now we are looking at position 3. And if you look at position 2, 3 of all these drugs, it is the same. Modifications are rarely attempted at this position 2 and 3. The carboxylic moiety at position 3 is a portion of the pharmacophore that binds the DNA gyrase of the bacteria cell, and that is, it is important not to interfere with even the stereochemistry or even with the structure, not to interfere with the stereochemistry or even with the structure around this area, because this area is pharmacophore. It is the area we are going to look at the mode of action. It is the area that is important in binding the DNA gyrase to enhance the mechanism of action. Generally, modification of the 3-carboxylic acid group produce compounds with decreased activity. Modification results in prodrugs that are activated in vivo. So if you are going to modify that area, especially position number 3, we have said position number 2 doesn't change. The link, that's a double bond between position number 2 and 3. You'll also see it cannot to change the carboxylic group. You derivatize into prodrugs that which in the body will be hydrolyzed to give us the free carboxylic group with retention of activity. Replacement of the 3-carboxyl group with the isothiazole. This is the isothiazole group. Produce the most potent isothiazoquinone with greater in vitro antibacterial activity than ciprofloxacin, but it had some undesirable properties such as insolubility and mammalian toxicity. So there was this drug. They also synthesized the isothiazoquinone. You can see we have said it has an isothiazole. If it's a thiazole, this should be a sulfur. So I think this we need to change to a sulfur for it to be an isothiazole. If it's an oxygen, it cannot be an isothiazole. So that should be a sulfur. But again, I will confirm. But we are saying when that was done, oh God. And you can still see that compound has still an amide. This is an amide, and you know amides, although stabilized by resonance, they can still undergo hydrolysis. So we expect this drug within the body, this will be cleaved to still give us the carboxylic group and retain the structure at that position for activity. But unfortunately, that drug, although having good activity, it was not retained as a quinolone because of the insolubility. Insolubility will result in precipitation, urea, and other mammalian toxicity. So again, let us be advised that, as we had said earlier, you're going to do drug discovery and development as a unit, and it's usually a very tedious process. Sometimes it's a very tedious process, because you add a group, you go to the lab and test for its activity. You add a group, you go to the lab until you get that molecule. So that is like, so you were doing a lot of screening, you're developing the molecules and doing a lot of screening, and you get molecules that are satisfactory in the therapeutic activity or in the pharmacological activity, and also with minimal toxicity. Sometimes, like we have seen with this molecule, you can get molecules with very good pharmacological activity, but their use is limited or restricted by their toxicity. So we are still at position 3 and 4. So again, you can still go back. Remember, position 1, position 2, position 3. We are looking at position 2 and 3, and we are saying that link must be retained, that carboxylic group must be retained. Now we are at 3 and 4, that position there. So when you look at position 3 and 4, it's having a link between the carboxylic acid group and the keto group are generally considered necessary for binding of the quinolones to DNA gyrase. So there must be that link between the carboxylic group and the keto group. It's of course a single bond. If you look at position number 3, it has a carboxylic group, and the position number 4, it has the oxo group. So that link must be maintained. So what we are saying is that from position 1 all the way to position number 4, nothing can really be changed. That area is the pharmacophoric, especially from position number 2 to position number 4. That is the pharmacophoric area. You cannot change anything again needed to bind the gyrase enzyme and to enhance the mechanism of action. Replacement of the keto group with other group has generally produced inactive or weakly active compounds. Again, in that area, we have insisted it has to be the way it is. It is pharmacophoric area. It is needed to bind. It is needed to bind the receptor for maximum or optimum pharmacological biological activity. Position 5, improved antibacterial activity has been reported against gram-positive strain, but by modifying or substituting this position. And if you again, this is the position I said for most of the drugs, with the exception of sparfloxacin, that position has a hydrogen, but it can be substituted with a group with improvement of activity. It has been found that bulky substituents at this position reduce activity markedly, while small substituents result in improved activity, such as methyl and amino substituent in case of grepafloxacin and sparfloxacin. I think the one we have the example of is sparfloxacin, whereby it has an amino group at position number 5. So you cannot again put large substituents. Large substituent definitely bring in steric effect, or what we are even calling the electronic effect. When we talk about the electronic effect, is that this substituent, remember, it has atoms. The atoms have some electron cloud. That electron cloud, it will bring a lot of repulsion when that molecule tries to approach another molecule. Remember, the receptor is also made of molecules. So that's what we're calling the electronic effect, because all atoms have are surrounded by orbitals. They have an electron cloud, and therefore, once you bring a big molecule, it will have a huge electron cloud, and therefore, that electron cloud, in trying to approach another receptor, there will be a lot of repulsion, and therefore, the accessibility to the receptor will be much reduced. So, we are saying, therefore, we can have only small groups and not huge groups, and again, that we have studied in details about spatial orientation in reference to accessibility to the receptor. Small groups can be able to move in like a straight molecule. Small groups will have lesser electronic effect, or will have lesser spatial hindrance or steric hindrance, and therefore they will be able to access the receptor more readily. Compounds with small substituents such as the nitro group, amino group, halogen, and alkyl groups have been synthesized. Among them, carbon 5 amino group enhances absorption and or tissue distribution. So when you put an amino group as in sparfloxacin, you enhance absorption and you also enhance tissue distribution. So that group was found to be very effective at that position. The incidence of phototoxicity, as I mentioned earlier, of sparfloxacin is the lowest of the fluoroquinolones because of the presence of the 5 amino group, which counteracts the effect of the 8 fluoro substituents. This should not be 8. This should be 6, sorry. 6. This should be 6. This was a mistake. This is at position 5. The fluoro group is at position 6. So we are also saying, so once you put an amino group was quite found to be quite good, and you do have the drug sparfloxacin. Once you put the amino group, it was found better absorption, better tissue distribution, and lower phototoxicity. Lower phototoxicity, and therefore that drug was an improvement of some of the other drugs that we had in the market. We have an example, as I've said, of sparfloxacin. Position 6, and as we have seen, with the exception of drugs like nitridicic acid, and which is not a fluoroquinolone, with these drugs get their name from the fluoro substituent at position number 6. And in almost all of them, that substituent was found to improve on activity. So the fluorine atom seems to be essential as it helps in binding with the DNA topoisomerase enzyme of the bacteria. Again, we are going to look at the mode of action, and we have the gyrase and the topoisomerase enzymes. These are the enzymes that are blocked by the fluoroquinolones. Or various carbon 6 substituents, you could have a hydrogen, you could have a chloro group, you could have a bromine, fluorine, a methyl, a thiomethyl group. These are an oxo group. This is a C double bond O, an oxo group. Again, we had, of course, a methyl group, a nitrile group, a nitro. It was found that the fluoro group resulted in dramatic increase in antibacterial potency. So you could have all these groups at that position, but it was found out that the fluoro group was the best, and that is why all the fluoroquinolones, all the fluoroquinolones with clinical indications have a fluorine at that position, because this is again out of the testing, out of in vitro and in vivo testing, fluorine was found to have improved, to be the one which had the best or the highest antibacterial potency. Fluoro group at carbon 6 seems to improve both the DNA gyrase complex binding and cell penetration of the corresponding derivatives. So fluoroquinolone fluoro group at carbon 6 seems to improve both the DNA gyrase complex binding. In other words, it helps in the binding again of the gyrase enzyme, and therefore enhancing again the mechanism of activity and also penetration of the cells. In other words, the fluorine, we know it increases lipid solubility, decreases the rate of metabolism, increases lipid solubility. As you increase the lipid solubility, you will increase the cell penetration when you compare those drugs with the derivatives with no fluoro group at position number 6. So again, nothing new. It is the same story we have said all along. If you put a fluoro group 1, we know it decreases the rate of metabolism. 2, it increases the lipid solubility. What will happen when you increase the lipid solubility? That drug will penetrate better. And somehow also it is having an influence on the binding ability of this drug with the receptor. And the receptor is what you're calling the gyrase enzymes or the topoisomerase enzyme. So there is improvement on the binding, there is improvement on lipid solubility. There is a decrease in the rate of metabolism. So that fluorine at 6, unlike of course of the other drug, the other substituent was found to give us maximum or the best activity. And of course, that's what you go for. Position 7, again, we have mentioned that position 7 again is highly flexible. Position 7 of the quinolones highly flexible, and you can have different groups here. You can have different groups at that position, starting with an nalidixic acid, where we saw nalidixic acid had a methyl group at that position. Then we went to norfloxacin, we had a piperazine group. We went to the others like ofloxacin, levofloxacin, we have a piperazine ring there. Then, because of floxacin and levofloxacin, the piperazine ring has been substituted. The norfloxacin piperazine ring has not been substituted. Up to the point where we went the trambofloxacin, where now you do not even have a piperazine ring, but you have a different type of bicyclic ring. So we are saying that position number 7 is very flexible. It is one of the areas which can be readily substituted to give us different fluoroquinolones with different potencies and different spectrums of activity. So that's all we are saying, that the evolution in quinolones mainly arises from the modification of this position of the basic molecule. This is the position where modification can bring about the major changes in potency. Carbon 7 piperazinyl group, in addition to carbon 6 fluorine substituent, has antibacterial potency far superior to that of earlier classical quinolones, like of course the quinolone. You can see we are not calling them fluoroquinolones, we are calling them earlier classical quinolones, like for example nalidixic acid, again is both gram positive and gram negative bacteria. So position number 7 is very key. The group you put there can highly influence difference. We are not saying the others are not key, because we have seen they're also important. But when you want, when there was need to improve on the potency, to improve on the spectrum of activity, the position that was found to bring a lot of difference in the different molecules is the position number 7, and the group that was put in this position in general, quinolones with small or linear carbon 7 substituents, let's say like hydrogen, chloro group, methyl, of course, as we saw in nalidic acid, that is an ethylene diamino group, a methyl amino group, and hydrazine group possess moderate to weak antibacterial activity. So in other words, the small linear group was not very good here. The small linear group, these groups you have mentioned, the methyl group, hydrogen, chloro group, hydrazine group, a secondary or a methyl amino group and an amino group were not very good in this position, and we needed a slightly bulkier group. Needed a slightly bulkier group, and I believe that's the next point. Various substitutions tried at carbon 7 position include substituted piperazine group, pyridinyl group, morpholynyl group. All these, I think we have mentioned some. Piperazine is what is found in most of them. Pyridinyl is where you have a 5-membered ring with a nitrogen. Morpholynyl is where you have an oxygen and a nitrogen. So these were rings tried at that position. And here saying in general, the substitution of a methyl, so those were rings that was tried. And as we have seen, the piperazine group was one of the groups that was found to have maximum activity. And no wonder we do have drugs in the market that have the piperazine group. And as we had said, now the piperazine group could be further substituted. So yes, therefore, in general, the substitution of methyl at carbon 4 prime, please note, 4 prime position of the piperazine group enhances gram-positive antibacterial activity with slight decrease in gram-negative activity. Remember, we had earlier said carbon 3 prime or even carbon 4 prime. So that was found definitely to increase gram-positive, but to decrease gram-negative activity slightly, but not significantly. Slightly, but not significantly. For it not to have good activity. So that is position number 7, highly flexible in terms of structural modification. And as we have said, you can have different groups. We have given the different groups you can have there. You can have the piperazine, which is not substituted. You can have the piperazine, which is substituted. You can have also other bicyclic rings as shown or as indicated in the other drugs that we have mentioned. Position 8, you can have a carbonate methoxy group. Methoxy or ethoxy group appears to increase the spectrum of activity. Like you can have carbonate methoxy as in gatifloxacin. Remember, carbonate down there. There are some drugs like gatifloxacin, which had a methoxy group. It has been shown to contribute significantly against anaerobe. So again, spectrum of activity could be improved by either having a methoxy group or an ethoxy group at position number 8. And no wonder we do have some drugs. We do have some drugs. Again, if we go back, we do have some drugs that have methoxy group. We do have some that is gatifloxacin. So you can see this is a methoxy group. So we do, and even moxifloxacin, that also is a methoxy group. So indeed, when they realize that you can put a methoxy group, because methoxy is a simpler group than ethoxy. So if methoxy gives us good activity, there is no need of going for the ethoxy. And of course, the bigger the group, also the greater the steric hydrogen. So you go for the smaller group, which also gives you good activity. So that position 8, you could have a methoxy group, and as we have seen, you do have examples in the market that do give good activity. So it's good to look at those examples so that we are reading from the same script. So we are saying methoxy, and as in the example of gatifloxacin. Carbonate fluoro or chloro derivatives are also more active in vivo owing to better oral absorption. We are also saying position number 8, you could also excuse me a bit, just excuse me a little bit. Yeah. So we are also saying at position number 8, you could also have a fluoro or a chloro group with, of course, in vitro, owing to better oral absorption. So if you give in vivo, that means the fluoro group, the chloro groups are halogens, so they will improve also penetration, lipid penetration, and also improve on the penetration of the microorganisms. And if you look at the structure of sparfloxacin, if you look at the structure of sparfloxacin, you will see that at that position number 8, sparfloxacin has a fluoro group. So we are only trying to see, why do we have these groups? The different groups are the different positions, and we want to understand. And that's all I'm trying to explain. So at position number 8, or sparfloxacin, you have a fluoro group, and that fluoro group again can improve on the lipid solubility. It will decrease the rate of metabolism. It will, of course, as it increases lipid solubility, it will increase bioavailability and also increase the penetration of the gram-positive microorganism. Oxygen substituent at carbonate position, that the substituent is part of a ring system, has also been shown to have better in vivo efficacy. Again, if you look, that's the only group we have not mentioned. If you look at ofloxacin, levofloxacin, look at levofloxacin and ofloxacin, we are talking about an carbonate where subsequent the oxygen is part of a ring system. And if you look at that oxygen, in other words, it's a cyclic ether. It's a cyclic ether. And you remember when we mentioned levofloxacin and ofloxacin when we were talking about the stereochemistry, where we say that that methyl group must have an alpha orientation for maximum activity. So we are looking at that group, and if you look at that link, it will be an oxygen, a CH3, and then a CH2. So that link is the one we are talking about. It has an oxygen as part of a cyclic ring, and that again was found to improve on the in vivo activity. And we have the drugs, of course, levofloxacin and ofloxacin. We could have others in the market, but we only need 1 or 2 examples to understand what we're talking about. So again, that is position number 8. So we have looked at position number 8, the oxygen substituent. We have looked at a fluoro substituent. We have looked at a substituent at that position. We looked at any other substituent. The others were at position number 7. So you can see again, there can be variation of the groups at position number 8, again with improvement of potency and even with alteration or improvement on the spectrum of activity. And I think position 8 is our last position. Position 8. Position 8 is indeed our last position. Do we have any questions so far? Do you have any other question? Any question? Thank God I've almost made it. I see somebody typing. Any questions so far? So is ofloxacin, the methyl is ofloxacin is methyl ortho to N1 or meta to N1? This is ortho, meta. So let's see if I have. So let's see if I have gotten the structure wrong, which we can confirm. We can always confirm the structures. I also get the structures from the book. So let me look at ofloxacin, just in case just in case there is. Always good to correct, to confirm structure. See, ofloxacin, yeah. Actually, you have a point. The structure I have in the, you're correct, yeah. The structure I have actually, mine is showing the levofloxacin, and that the methyl group, my methyl group is actually meta. But according to, yeah, the structure I've seen, thank you for that correction. Structure I'm seeing, levofloxacin structure also, let me just see it again. Yeah, thank you. It should actually be meta. It should be, sorry, it should be ortho. So that group there, the methyl group should be ortho. Thank you very much. It should be ortho to the nitrogen. Since I also, sometimes you get the structures also online. So that group, thank you very much. The methyl group should be ortho to the nitrogen, not as per the structure. Both in levofloxacin and ofloxacin, we should correct and move the methyl group ortho. What I need you also to look at is, for next time, and confirm the mechanism of action of the quinolones. How do they bring about the activity? Confirm, check up, and confirm mechanism of action of the quinolones. How is it different from any of the other mechanisms of action? Now, the last bit I want us to look at before we close, we have 9 minutes. You know, we do have a lot of counterfeits, as I said, of the quinolones. This is because these drugs, especially initially, they were very, very expensive. Even now, if just when you go for it, I don't know whether it's when you go for your attachment or any of these days, walk to any chemist and ask for norfloxacin or ciproxin. When I used to have, because there's a time I used to do retail chemist, I used to do retail pharmacy, and I had a chemist. I think we were selling ciproxin, which is the original ciproxin. We were selling it one tablet at 373 shillings. Just one. At the moment, I don't know how much it costs. But of course, you will have, that's how you ask yourself, how can the original tablet cost 370? Then you go there for the generic, it costs you 30, 20 bob. Sometimes you do have, sometimes it raises a lot of questions. And because of the initial cost of these drugs, the initial cost of production, the initial cost of production of the original drugs, I bet a lot of money was put into it. And of course, you do understand that some of the drug companies, the people who are there are not very honest. And for them, it is business like any other business. So some of their drugs are very, very expensive. That's the branded drugs.